One of the things that students often find a little frustrating with not just my approach to teaching, but a lot of professors and instructors' approaches to teaching is that, for example, when you submit, if you're in an English 101 or 102 class or even English 203, if you submit a draft essay or a draft of some kind, I don't go in and find every error and provide you with the corrective action for it. And there is a method behind that madness. And I'm going to talk about that here so that hopefully you understand why I take this approach. And it can be summed up in the old example of teaching a person to fish versus giving a person a fish. The idea being, now no one knows really where this saying came from. Some people say it was a Chinese proverb. There's no evidence that it was. It's hard to know where this came from. But the idea is, give a person a fish, they eat for a day. Teach a person to fish, they eat for a lifetime. That's the idea. There's a pedagogical approach to this. Now, pedagogy or pedagogy is simply the concepts and theories behind teaching and learning. And my master's degree thesis was on the pedagogy of online learning. And so I try to apply good, proven, research-based approaches to teaching and learning. And that's what I do here. So I want to talk about how I go about the initial process of providing feedback early in the process of doing an assignment. So my first responsibility to you is to provide you with all of the necessary resources, everything that you need to accomplish the assignments that you're given. And so I follow these basic steps to make sure that I have done that. And I bring this up because if you feel after you've accessed the lessons, you've done the assigned reading, you've looked at the resources available, and you think that there isn't one question or another hasn't been properly answered, then at that point, specifically drop me a note and say, hey, I've looked everywhere for the answer to this question. I can't find it in any of your materials, and then ask me the question. I will do one of two things at that point. I'll either direct you to where that answer can be found, or if it turns out I haven't properly answered that question or addressed that issue, I will answer your question and I will change the course accordingly and make sure that I've addressed that. Usually, almost always, it's the former. Usually there either is I've provided an answer and I can tell you where to go to look for it. Now that's where sometimes students get frustrated. Why won't he just answer the question? Let me walk you through it. So I have devised lessons, my recorded lessons like this one, intending to make sure that you have the supplemental information you need to understand assignments and complete them on time and according to the requirements. I provide you access to various resources. Of course, there's a textbook. There is, for any writing class and any class that involves writing, so even in Com 101 where you're writing a short essay, I provide access, a link, simply to Purdue OWL, which is by far the best available resource on how to write for college. It answers all the questions. It provides a lot of good basic information. I try to provide very clear instructions for your assignments so that you know exactly what's required. If that doesn't provide the kind of direction you want, that's where you can try to ask me a more specific question, and I will deal with that. I provide samples of various assignments so that you can see an option. These are not meant to be, this is the ultimate goal on how you are exactly to do it. It's one way that either sometimes I've written the examples, or they were written by a prior student, how they approached it. In my early feedback on a draft or regarding questions, what I tend to do is to provide nudges for you. Here's a place to go for that information. And then when you submit the final version, I will go in at that point and provide a lot of very specific thoughts, positive and not negative, but opportunities to improve. And I'll explain here in a moment why that is my approach to handling all of these assignments. First of all, let me just walk you through what my expectations are for you, and that is A, you will watch all of the video lessons all the way through. Now, based on the hit rate that I see on YouTube, of course I use YouTube because it's just simpler for all of us to go to YouTube. Based on the hit rate, I know that, so the difference between the number of visits that one of my lessons has before a semester starts, and then the number that is increased by when an assignment, that specific assignment that lesson is based on, is due, I know that some of you don't watch the lessons. This is the equivalent of skipping class. These are really fundamentally the building blocks for learning in these classes. And so you've just got to start by watching the lessons at least once. Sometimes it's helpful to go back and review them again. Stop in the middle, take a whatever. I try to keep them relatively short. This one is unfortunately longer than most because there's important information that I want to convey in one lesson. Do the assigned reading in the textbook. In most cases, the way I use a textbook is as a resource and not as, you don't have to read the entire textbook, but there are specific chapters or sections that are relevant to each of the assignments, and it's important to do that reading. It will help give you the information you need to do well on the assignment. I usually provide examples of the essay or other kinds of assignments. Now, I don't provide an example for a recorded presentation for reasons that I won't get into now, but basically it's difficult to get permission to record students and then use that. So I don't do examples of actual Zoom-based presentations, but otherwise there's usually an example there for you to look at least one. Again, I provide a lot of various resources. So Purdue OWL is the basic one, but there are other places that I can send you, or I do send you, so that you can have the information, have the access to the tools required to do well on the assignments. And then I expect you to do some heavy lifting. Use your brains, use your critical thinking skills, use your imagination, go out, gather up the information that you need from all of the sources I provide, and then apply yourself to it. And when we do that, there are various outcomes that can happen, most of which are well within the requirements of each of the assignments. This is not the sort of thing where every assignment is going to look precisely the same. That's what I expect of students. Remember that if you were attending these courses face-to-face, you'd be spending 3 hours per week in the classroom, or if it's in a reduced 8-week term, you'd be spending 6 hours per week in the classroom. The materials and the lessons provided online are simply intended to replace that. Now, online learning is fundamentally different than face-to-face learning, and so I try to apply the techniques that research and data and my own research have indicated are going to work best for the unique process of learning online versus learning face-to-face. Finally, I will address this question. Dude, why are you doing this? Why are you making it so hard? So I've provided a general example so far, but I want to now close this lesson with just some basic examples of pedagogically sound reasons why I do this. Now, you don't need to remember all this. You might not even care. It might not even have occurred to you. If that's the case, go ahead and move on. But if you really want to understand how I approach my job in teaching you online, these are the basic principles behind the teaching you to fish approach. One, you're going to learn more deeply if you do it this way. If I just identify every error and how to correct it, you're really not learning anything. And so you need to be the one to go out and, based on all of the helps and all of the information and all of the teaching that I provide, then you need to figure out how to apply that. That's a process of deep learning where it embeds itself. It's a process that requires critical thinking, where you are learning to use skills that you have that you may not use as often as you have been used to. It encourages, enhances, supports retention. You keep things that you learn this way longer than if I just provide you all of the straightforward answers. It helps you kind of assess how you learn yourself and, okay, what am I missing? What do I need to change here to do this assignment this way? That process, that reflective process, is an essential part of learning. And then finally, it encourages metacognition. Now, metacognition is a big word. It's considered now one of the basic critical skills that employers are looking for. It's basically self-awareness. Do you understand how you think, how you learn, how you go about doing things? This process where I give you enough stuff, enough lessons, enough access to resources, enough information, enough clarity in the assignment for you to then, through your process of creating the assignment, you start to understand how you think and how you work. Now, the final thing I'll say here is probably 70% of students will be equally successful or equally challenged, regardless of whether it's a face-to-face class or an online class. And then there's that 30% who you could basically divide it in half. Half of that group will succeed far better in a face-to-face environment. Half of that group is going to be inclined to do better in an online environment, simply because of background and all of the things that make us human. So you may have to find ways of changing how you approach an online course versus a face-to-face course. It may be completely comfortable for you, or it might be completely foreign to you. The final thing I'll say is, if you do want more specific support, I encourage you early to reach out to the tutoring center at CEI and work with a tutor. They're not going to answer every question for you either, but they will be able to provide you more specific assistance in how to go about meeting the requirements of a specific assignment. So that is what I do, why I do it. If after viewing this lesson, if after on any assignment you have done all of the stuff required and you still have a question, at that point, reach out to me and we can exchange information. And I will, as I said, either send you to a place where the information is available or just respond to answer your question and then maybe tweak my course accordingly.